Hi friends, how are you today? Are you doing good? Good, I'm glad to hear that. Well, today is May 5th, and you may or may not know that today is Cinco de Mayo, which is a holiday that is celebrated in predominantly Hispanic places in America. One of those places being Texas. Texas has a large Hispanic population and has been since the beginning of Texas. And there are lots of celebrations in cities all across Texas and the United States as well. So I thought that because of that, I thought that I would tell you a little bit about Cinco de Mayo in case you didn't know. I would go through the history of it with you. And what better reason than to drink a good old Texas beer, my favorite, Shiner Bock. And I thought, since it is summertime, I would cut an orange to put an orange wedge on my beer. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll get my drink ready, and then I'll tell you about the history of Cinco de Mayo, okay? So let me begin. Let's see, I have two oranges. I think I'll use this one. They say that you're supposed to roll citrus before you cut it to keep the juices in, but ain't got time for that, so. Okay, got my orange slice all cut. Man, that orange smells really good. Okay, and here I have a Shiner Bock, my favorite beer. If you watched my Texas Independence Day video, you'll know that Shiner is really the official beer of Texas. Unofficial, I guess, because Lone Star is, I guess, the official beer, but nobody actually drinks that. At least that I know. All the Texans that I know drink Shiner Bock. So here we go. that is, first of all, let me preface, I don't know a ton about Cinco de Mayo. I know a little bit. I can tell you what I know. Not a historian by any means, although I do enjoy history. So, I might say some things that are not exactly right. I'm going to do my best, okay? So, Cinco de Mayo is Spanish for the 5th of May. Cinco de Mayo, the 5th of May. And it commemorates a battle won by the country of Mexico against the country of France. So it's a Mexican holiday, sort of. We'll get into that here in a little bit. A lot of people confusingly think that Cinco de Mayo is a holiday that celebrates Mexican Independence Day, and that's just not quite true. In fact, it's not true at all, because that is celebrated on September 16th, I believe, which commemorates a date in 1810 when Mexico declared independence from its Spanish colonial rulers, and that's what started that in 1810. Cinco de Mayo celebrates an event that happened in oh boy, I gotta look at my notes for this one. 1862. So not 1810. 50 years later, in 1862, is what Cinco de Mayo celebrates. So let me drink some of my beer and then we'll set it up. So let's set the scene. Okay. So 1810, like I said, Mexico declared its independence from Spain. And then, again, if you watch my Texas independence video, right around 1836 or so, 1835, 1836, that's when Texas fought for its independence from Mexico. And then, as a result of that, once America brought Texas into the Union, that sparked a war with Mexico called the Mexican-American War, basically fighting over where, there's a fly in here again, where Texas, where the southern border of Texas is, the Americans, we wanted, obviously, more land, and we said it was on the Rio Grande side, and Mexico said, no, it's, we want more land, it's on the Nueces side. So, sort of a battle, a war was fought over basically how large is Texas. So Mexico fought that battle, and then they fought, they fought the war, and then they fought another war called the War of Reform, and that was from about 1857 to 1860, which was a civil war between two political parties, the conservatives and the liberals, and the conservatives were backed by the Pope, and it's not important what the political ideologies were. There were two parties, they were fighting, the conservatives and the liberals, and they clashed, and the liberals won over the conservatives, and I believe they actually ousted Santa Anna, who had famously fought against the Texans in their war for independence. The liberals ousted him at some point during all of that. Anyway, point being that Mexico had fought a lot of wars pretty close, back to back, over several decades, and they were broke. They had no money. Well, let's see, this is around 1861 or so. And, boy, that's so good. They owed tens of millions of dollars to foreign countries, Spain, Great Britain, and France being some of those. And when the newly elected president, whose name was Benito Juarez, when he came into office, one of the things that he did was to say, countries out there, we're broke. We don't have any money. We're not going to pay for 2 years because we can't. We're broke. And the countries who they owed money to didn't like that. They wanted their money. And so they sent troops over to Mexico. So again, that was Great Britain, Spain, and France, who had all lent money to Mexico to fight some of these wars. Spain and Great Britain ended up working on a deal with Mexico. I'm not sure what the deal was, but they worked out a deal and they left peacefully. France, however, did not leave. The leader of France at the time was Napoleon III, who was the nephew, I believe, of Napoleon I, Napoleon Bonaparte. And so Napoleon III was hoping to increase the land that France owned, and put a French focus. They wanted to acquire land in Mexico, in that part of the world, and so this was sort of an easy way, I suppose, to kind of kick that off. Again, I'm not a historian. This is just me kind of summarizing some of what I know and some of what I've researched. Okay, so this is 1861. This is during the American Civil War. Normally, if the Civil War had not been going on, the United States would have stepped in and, I don't know what they would have done, I guess sided with Mexico. There was a thing called the Monroe Doctrine that was written in 1823 or so, by a man named James Monroe. Basically, the doctrine says no more Europeans are allowed to come over to this side of the world and colonize. It was Americans' desire to end that colonialism. I'm sure it was, navel gazing in some capacity, but that's what it was. And so, because we were so busy, focused on the Civil War, we weren't able to back up what we had previously said we would do in the Monroe Doctrine. So we did not come to the aid of Mexico. We were a little busy fighting the Civil War. So France moves in, and they are headed towards the capital of Mexico City. Their intent is to take the capital and take over the country. Boy howdy, love me a Bock. So, let's see, where was I? Right, okay, so France at the time was one of the most technologically advanced armies in the world. Again, remember, the leader of France at the time is Napoleon III. Napoleon the First was not that long ago. Napoleon Bonaparte, he tried to take over the world, or at least a large part of it. So, they were very technologically advanced, and they had been undefeated for about 50 years at this point. And so, the Mexicans were obviously pretty nervous, I'm sure. The French army moves towards the capital, and they have a skirmish with, it's a battle, not a skirmish, they have a battle with the Mexican army in the city of Puebla, which I guess is outside Mexico City. I'm not entirely sure. So that was on May 5th, 1862. I believe there were about 4,000 Mexican soldiers and about 8,000 French soldiers. And the French were very technologically advanced. They had awesome artillery and rifles. And the Mexican army, again, was broke, and they weren't as trained or skilled or advanced. So the odds were definitely stacked against the Mexican army. But what ended up happening is I think the French were probably cocky. They were overconfident. I don't think they prepared themselves correctly. Anyway, they tried to take the Mexican army at Puebla, and they had 3 failed attempts to take the hill. It was a battle uphill to where the Mexican army was located. The French failed 3 times, and they weren't able to do it. And they retreated after like a full day of fighting. And I think something like maybe 500 French were killed, and only like maybe less than 100 Mexicans were killed. So it was a victory. The battle was the Mexican army. Mexico won that battle. And what ended up happening is France kind of pulled back a bit, and I think pretty much immediately, once Mexico had won that battle, the president of Mexico, Benito Juarez, I'm pretty sure he basically said, "Hey everyone, this is a holiday now. Cinco de Mayo. We stopped the French. Odds were stacked against us, and we still conquered them. This is a holiday. Let's celebrate this." So the French army pulled back. I'm not quite sure how long they pulled back. It might have been a year, or maybe less. I'm not sure. Not more than a year. So after that, they regrouped, and Napoleon III said, "The heck with this. I'm sending 30,000 troops back to Puebla, and we are knocking them out. We are taking the capital," and that's what they did. 30,000 French troops came in, and they took the capital of Mexico, Mexico City. So although the Battle of Puebla, which was on the 5th of May, Cinco de Mayo, although the Mexican army didn't win the battle, they ended up losing that war. So the French came back and took the city, took the country, and they established, they put someone else in power over Mexico, and the person they installed as kind of a puppet ruler was Ferdinand Maximilian von Habsburg. I don't know anything about this dude, but he was the ruler there, and the former president, Benito Juarez, escaped to the mountains, and they began to do some guerrilla tactics against the French army while they were in the mountains. So 3 years go by. With the French has taken Mexico. The French are now in charge of Mexico. 3 years later, the U.S. Civil War has now ended. The Union has won, and the U.S. has begun to look outside its own borders. And in accordance with the Monroe Doctrine, they start to put pressure rather on the French to leave Mexico, go back to Europe. And so, because of the pressure that the U.S. put on France, I'm not exactly sure what the pressure was exactly. I think that one thing is they were funding the former president Benito Juarez. I think they were funding his rebel army as they fought against France. Turn my notes here. They're just hiding. You didn't see them, did they? But they're right there. dip, no. I'm gonna take this moment to enjoy my delicious Shiner Bock, brewed in a small town of Shiner, Texas. Maybe one day I'll take y'all there, show y'all around Shiner, Texas. Would you like to see Shiner, Texas? Let me know in the comments if you want me to take a road trip to Shiner and drink all the Shiner that I possibly can, because I would do it. Okay, so the United States have put pressure on France. France withdrew from Mexico. Napoleon III withdrew. The puppet ruler that they had left in Mexico, Maximilian, I'm not quite sure why he stayed in Mexico and continued to fight, even though, Napoleon had gotten the heck out of there. So Maximilian stayed, and he fought, and he lost. He was eventually defeated, and he was executed along with his generals in a firing squad. And Benito Juarez, the former president, new president now, retook Mexico. There's that fly, just buzzing around my head. Is he on my shoulder? He's right behind me, isn't he? Get out of here. Scram. One of these days, there's not going to be a fly in my video. It's going to be a good day, but that day's not today. So, sorry about that. Drink some more Shiner. Yummy. Okay. So, that's Cinco de Mayo, right? So let's kind of sum up, right? Cinco de Mayo was in honor of a battle fought in Puebla, Mexico, where the Mexican army they withstood against a larger force of French, and they defeated them. And they were proud of what they had done. They were proud that they defeated a larger, technologically advanced army. That's basically, in a nutshell, Cinco de Mayo. Even though they lost the war that was part of, but they regained power, so it's all copacetic in the end, right? Okay, so why does anyone celebrate this little battle that basically ended up in defeat? The defeat of the war that Mexico fought against France. It's complex in its own right. Mexico, most parts of Mexico, I should say, don't actually celebrate Cinco de Mayo, although it is a Hispanic Mexican holiday. The city of Puebla still celebrates, and I think some of the surrounding areas do as well. But the country of Mexico as a whole, they don't celebrate Cinco de Mayo. They do celebrate Mexican Independence Day, which, as I said, I believe is September 16th or so. So they don't really celebrate in Mexico. However, in the United States, it's celebrated a good deal, specifically in large pockets of areas where there are Mexican Americans, people of Mexican descent. That's where it is largely celebrated. Again, Texas has a lot of those pockets, specifically in San Antonio, also in Houston, and of course there are pockets, Austin and Dallas and all over the place, predominantly Houston, San Antonio. So how did Americans begin to celebrate a Mexican holiday? Sort of a period, or there series of events that happened. First series of events is that basically right after the Battle of Puebla, or maybe a year or two later, in 1863, Mexicans who were living in California at the time heard about what had happened in the city of Puebla, and they celebrated. They had a big party. Wahoo! Our people defeated a larger French force. Go Mexico! We rock. That's they had a party, and apparently so. It was very impressive. And so they began to celebrate that. It's sort of like Alamo is to, let's see, I'm not very good at analogies. The Alamo is to Texas. Maybe I should back this up. Cinco de Mayo is to Mexican Americans, as the Alamo is to Texans. The Alamo, big battle, outnumbered force of Texans. We fought, and although we ultimately lost, we were proud of the fight and all the the bravery that we had been a part of. Same thing here with Mexico. And so ex-patriots of Mexico celebrated for this reason. But there was also another layer of this, in that California, where there was that pocket of Mexican expats, that pocket began to grow, and they celebrated Cinco de Mayo, I believe, as a way to focus or bring attention on non-white Americans, in the sense that this was still around the Civil War times, and America was still working through its issues with slavery, trying to figure out how to get rid of it, basically. So I think that Mexicans or Mexican Americans, living in California, saw Cinco de Mayo as a way to say, California is a diverse place. We are against slavery. We are against white supremacy. There is diversity, and we're anti-slavery, basically. I believe it was something to that effect. Maybe it was some bit of anti-colonialism. We don't want to be conquered again, by racially. We don't want to be conquered racially, just as France attempted to conquer Mexico. Something along these lines. I'm sure I'm butchering this, but this is how I'm telling it. So I'm the one with the video, so you gotta listen to me. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments. I would love to be corrected. Like I said, I don't know that much about Cinco de Mayo, and I'm just going off some loose notes. So, okay, so that was the case for how Cinco de Mayo was celebrated for several decades, until around the 40s, through the 60s or so, and those several decades in the United States, civil rights movements began to appear, including one focused on Mexican Americans, and this holiday of Cinco de Mayo was a way to celebrate that Mexican heritage, and a way to refocus people on the fact that Mexican Americans had just as much right to be in America as European people of European descent. So it was a way to bring that back to the focus. another reason why Cinco de Mayo is important as a historical event is because had the Mexican army not defeated the French army at the Battle of Puebla, the American Civil War could have been significantly altered because France, i.e. Napoleon III, was his plan was to take over in Mexico and then support the Confederacy. I believe the idea was something to the effect of buying the cotton from the Confederacy that they were not able to sell to the rest of the world because of Union blockades. The Union had blocked all the ports where the South had planned to sell its cotton. Cotton was the cash crop, and their original plan, the Confederacy's original plan, was to fund the war by the sale of cotton. And if they had been able to, then they could have made a significant amount of money. But one of the Union strategies was to block the ports and stop that, so they weren't able to do that. And France was going to buy that cotton, thereby funding the Confederacy and getting that cotton which they needed for war supplies. I don't know, uniforms, not sure. When the Mexican army defeated the French at the Battle of Puebla and the French withdrew, that was just enough time for the Civil War to really get pretty deep into it, and basically the Confederacy was on the losing end. Like I said, it was about a year before the French came back with those 30,000 troops and took Mexico City. So if the French had been successful and if they had defeated the Mexican army at that day on Cinco de Mayo, then it's possible the Confederacy could have won, because they would have been much better funded, and that was one of the issues with the Confederacy, because they were badly funded and badly equipped. So just another note bene for you. Last I told you, Cinco de Mayo was being celebrated in the 40s through the 60s as a result of the Civil Rights Movement. And then it really picked up in the 80s because of, guess what? Money. And I'm going to take a drink of my beer. Money, because beer companies, although not Shiner, I don't know, Miller, Budweiser, I'm not quite sure, beer companies began to popularize and advertise Cinco de Mayo as a way to make money, as a way to sell more beer. And so that spread pretty quickly. They had a bunch of campaigns and whatnot. And that pretty much cemented Cinco de Mayo as a holiday all across the United States. And now it's celebrated in pockets of rich Mexican culture all across the United States. In fact, I believe that more beer is sold on Cinco de Mayo than during the Super Bowl or during St. Patrick's Day. So, just a fun note. Cinco de Mayo is celebrated all over the United States. Places like Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, San Antonio, New York, etc., 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 from coast to coast. There's some places in other parts of the world that celebrate it. Canada, I believe, celebrates it in some parts. It's mostly just wherever expats are from Mexico. That's probably where Cinco de Mayo is going to be celebrated. And it's celebrated with parties and festivals and parades, and there's usually music and authentic traditional dress and food, beer, lots of beer, like I said, lots of traditional drinks as well, and non-traditional drinks like the margarita. I very well could have gotten a lot of this wrong, and if you know better than me, please let me know. Call me out in the comments and let's talk about it. If you learned something new, let me know in the comments what it was. Let's talk about that. If you like this video, then like and subscribe and hit that notification bell to get updated when I push out more videos. And let me know what you thought of this. And yeah, thanks so much for tuning in. And I will see y'all